Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast. Spoiler alert, we don't discuss conventional, linear, boring career change here. This is the place where we talk about finding an aligned career path that feels like an extension of who you are, where you get paid for being yourself. Forget personality quizzes, soul-crushing scrolling on job sites, and breaking your brain trying to find your why. Join me and many other career changers who've changed their career holistically by first defining who they are at their core and then using this blueprint to design a fulfilling career or business. We use the mind-body-soul approach, and we take into consideration the complexity and multidimensionality of all that you are and want to represent in the world. This is where purpose-led careers are born and built. I'm your host, Vilma. Let's go. Hi, lovers and friends. Hope you're so well. Happy Samhain. I'm recording this on a foggy Halloween evening, and that is definitely my favorite time of the year. So if you're listening to this real time, I hope that you had a magical weekend. Now, if you've been in my orbit, whether you're on my email list or you're following me on Instagram, you probably know by now that all I talk about is archetypes, and I'm living in this healer archetype la la land lately because all I do is think, talk, sleep, eat healer archetypes. And if you for some reason have no idea what I'm talking about, but you're someone who is thinking of career change, or you already have started your career transition and you're called to careers and businesses of impact, of service, of healing, make sure that you do go to the show notes and click on the healer archetype assessment, because what that assessment does, it can give you your primary and secondary archetype, which will point you towards the aligned direction when it comes to setting up that healing career, that healing business. And I feel like that assessment can save you years of confusion. But in this episode, what I wanted to do is really just give you a little bit of an origin story of this archetypal system and how it was birthed and how it affected me and my story with archetypes, and really why you should care about it and why I think it's so important if you are a baby healer, an established healer, someone who is in healing adjacent fields, to actually know about your core gifts and why I even created that assessment. Now, if you're completely new to the healer lightworker world, what I would love to ask you or suggest to you is to go back and listen to 2 other episodes where I'm kind of laying the ground for the Lightworker, the healing arts, the Lightworker universe, the healing arts. So there's an episode called Are You a Lightworker, which is introducing the Lightworker concept. And I know that to so many of you, this concept is not new, but I'm talking to the people who perhaps struggle to identify as healers or struggle to call themselves Lightworkers because it may feel conceited or arrogant to think that you're someone who's a healer, because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions around what a healer is, and that's definitely something that I do want to address in this episode as well. And then there's a second episode that I would invite you to listen to, which is called Your Archetype is Your Business Strategy. So if you haven't listened to those episodes, I think they are great introductory episodes before you listen to this one, because with this episode we're continuing this like world building of the Lightworker universe, if you will. And the reason why I say even if you're already in the healing field, I would still invite you to either take the assessment or listen to the episodes is because I feel like healer misalignment is still quite unexplored topic, and I love to expand on this and just humbly add my 2 cents on what I've been noticing in my practice and just observing the energy shifts in a collective. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all started. So when I started my practice years and years back, when I went through my own career change process, I soon quickly realized that I was mostly attracting clients who were looking for meaning, who were looking for fulfillment and purpose in their careers. So it wasn't necessarily the financial rewards that were their core need, even though obviously there's always a need, right? We do want to live comfortable, abundant lives, but it was the meaning that was missing. And many of them had actually extremely successful careers, judging by the societal norms, but they felt incredibly unfulfilled inside. And I would often hear adjectives like, I feel empty, I feel dead inside, I'm always miserable. I feel like a zombie going through motions when I need to show up for my day job. They had just simply lost the spark. So what I would do then, and still do in my one-on-one practice, so using my holistic career change process that I had developed, I would take them through this career change process of first and foremost helping them remember who they are before they were told who they should be to meet expectations, to get validation, and to be quote unquote respectable members of society. And that process definitely involved lots of intentional introspection, learning how to connect to their intuition or to their authority if we're looking at it through the human design lens. And really, it was all about reclaiming the process of reclamation, reclaiming their alignment, their truth, and their authentic voice. So I would walk my clients through this process one-on-one, and then I launched groups. So I would also walk them through this process in groups. And then I started noticing something. And very early on, it was a trend, a pattern with them, is that many of them not only were looking for meaning, they were also called to careers of impact and service. So a lot of the times these two went hand in hand. When someone said, I want a meaningful and fulfilling career, a lot of the times that meant some sort of career of service. And what I realized that many of them were light workers, baby healers, even though I don't like that term, but essentially someone who's just starting out to recognize that they have certain gifts. People who had healing abilities, if you will. And by the way, when I talk about that, I also feel like I need to give a bit of a caveat here. When I say a light worker or healer, I mean anyone who feels deeply called to support people, support planets, support animals, support nature. So it's a very much a broad umbrella term, because I feel like people often have a very narrow and almost judgmental definition of it when they hear the word a healer. So a lot of them think of a psychic medium who talks to dead people, which is like, couldn't be further from the truth. Healers are also people that create sacred systems and frameworks. For example, like intuitive business coaches are also healers because they represent the architect archetype. Or some artists and performers, they are also healers. They heal through creative expression. So one of my goals with this work is also to help people, but in particular, light workers themselves, expand that definition of what a healer is or what a light worker is. And I use them interchangeably. Someone told me that people have different definitions. For me, energetically, as an intuitive, when I tune into that frequency of the word, they have very similar frequency. Therefore, I use them interchangeably. We have so many preconceived notions and judgments around healing arts, especially alternative or complementary healing arts. And again, in particular, those of us who are coming from strong, strict religious backgrounds. I myself come from a, Roman Catholic background. So often I feel like I would hear, like when I would go to church or we would have these Bible studies, I would hear them talk about these gifts as sinful. And there is, I feel like, a lot of biblical condemnation even, and a lot of historical opposition within the institution of church against these gifts, against healers who have gifts that sometimes are hard to explain. So on top of everything that we're dealing with, I feel like many healers also carry that ancestral wounding around their own gifts, and it's very much internalized. Some people refer to it as a witch wound, but I feel like it's very much in our DNA. And also what I must say, what I must emphasize, that I do believe that every single one of us are gifted, every single one of us are intuitive, and all of us are psychic. Because I do not believe in hierarchy within the healer community. I don't believe like this archetypal system that I birthed, like one archetype is not better than the other. They just have a slightly different flavor of the gift. And the difference between healers is, or when we see some people maybe are able to tap into the unseen world or channel, is really just happens because of the individual openness to explore and embrace these gifts. Okay. Or perhaps we are bringing in the experience from past lives, from past lifetimes into this world. So it's almost like tapping into certain gifts feels like a remembering. It doesn't feel like learning something new. Okay. So anyway, going back to the system. So here's what I did. So when I started working with these purpose-driven women, I noticed that they would all need help with, first and foremost, helping them crystallize, identify, and pinpoint their core healing gifts. Because like I said, they're a slightly different flavor to them. And at first it felt super unique. And later I started seeing patterns. At first I thought like, oh, every gift is completely unique. It's kind of like a fingerprint. However, there are obviously patterns in absolutely everything. So I started infusing astrology and elemental magic and some mythology and numerology, and I started mapping out these patterns that are starting to come up for the clients that I work with. And I realized that they represented these different archetypes, healer archetypes specifically, because obviously there is an archetypal system for absolutely everything in this world. Some of them, for example, were more masculine energy driven, and it doesn't mean that they were heavily skewed to masculine just because they had suppressed their feminine. Some of them had integrated both energies, but they're still leaning on more masculine skills. And some of them perhaps were more feminine. And there are also archetypes that are a beautiful combination of both, like equal feminine and masculine. And so that was essentially the start of this archetypal system. And because I took so many people through this process, I first would start when it was like this archetypal system was in its infancy, I would start with asking about the healer pillars, like spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. And I would be like, okay, so there are 4 pillars. I talk about it in the Are You a Lightworker episode. There are 4 pillars. Which ones are you drawn to? Because I know that all the lightworkers are interested in everything, but we need to pinpoint your core essence, the foundation upon which you'll be building your business, building your practice, building your healing work. So that's how it started. And, I'm going to be honest with you. I really, at first, when I started seeing the patterns and how I was taking through the process, I'm like, there must be some sort of assessment or quiz to help people identify those core healing gifts. Because I was exposed to this healing arts world so intimately, I was in the front seat. I knew so many modalities. I knew which pillars they represented. And I was thinking there must be someone who created some sort of an assessment to help them pinpoint those gifts. And after doing some research, I did find some assessments, but the problem is they were so surface level and they were so almost cringy sometimes. And they're like, oh, you're a magician. And it was so generic. And I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something more in depth, more specific to really support people in claiming and understanding what their core gift is about. Because as healers, we have so many blind spots. People often say, well, who am I to help? Like my clients would say, who am I to help other people when I'm still sorting through my own mess in life? And I was like, listen, let me tell you, the fact that you are still sorting through life, that is not going to change. We will forever be working on our personal issues. But the problem is that a lot of the times it's so hard to direct the healing or the insight that we had on us ourselves, but we can find it still very easy to identify and support other people because a lot of us see through the noise. A lot of us see the patterns. So if you're someone who's like, I can't embrace my gifts until I sort my life out, you will be sorting your life out for the rest of your life and possibly robbing the world off of your healing gifts. So please don't do that. That's why I'm a big advocate for healers need healers. We need our own support. We need to choose people we align with so they could help us see our own gifts. So going back to my story. So basically what happened is because I couldn't find that in-depth assessment, the way that I picture it, the downloads that I was getting on how healing work has pillars and each pillar will have certain modalities and each modality will have certain tarot, astrological, elemental associations with it, right? It's almost like I was getting starting to see like a map, the lay of the land, and I couldn't find an assessment that would help them identify it. So what did I have to do? Well, in the end, I had to create it. And first and foremost, I did that for my clients because I'm like, I'm missing the tool to help them identify those core healing gifts quicker. So at first it was just 4 pillars, and then the assessment got sophisticated until I ended up with those 10 core healer archetypes. And what, again, it's a little bit of a misunderstanding, and I will say this, especially if you've taken the assessment. If you haven't taken the assessment, please do. But we all contain all the 10 archetypes within us. The only difference is the quantity of each archetype that we have. So for example, some may have 60% mother and 20% mystic and a few ounces of all the other archetypes. Some have it reversed. So imagine it's a little bit like we all have the same ingredients, but the quantity of each ingredient will end up creating a completely different dish. Okay, so say if we're baking and you add more flour, you will end up with biscuits. But if you add more milk, you may end up with a fluffy cake. I'm not a great cook, but I suppose you get the gist of it. So the same ingredients, but the amount of ingredients, right? How many ounces we'll put in of each will determine the outcome, the result, what we will be eating at the end. But here's where it gets interesting. So mind you, when I started as a life coach and then a career coach, and then, I added all the certifications, I was basically acting as a primary alchemist archetype. So those of you who don't know, alchemist is someone who loves digging deeper, someone who loves uncovering the root cause of things, who are great at holding space, listening, asking deep questions. And the expression of an alchemist is your conventional therapy. Okay, so conventional talk therapy, different types of coaching and space holding. So when transitioned and then I was stacking up my certifications, I was training to be an alchemist because that's what the essence of these modalities were about, is the alchemist modalities, which is beautiful. It's amazing, except for when I started to realize that alchemist was not my primary archetype. And as you can imagine, it was extremely shocking for me. I was in denial for some time. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I had spent years studying, deepening my knowledge, evaluating my client sessions, learning and improving, just to find out that this was not my primary ingredient. It was there in a mix in the top ingredients, but it wasn't my primary. It wasn't my primary healing expression. So for a while, it was slightly disorienting. And then I realized, again, that the healer misalignment was a thing and not many talk about it. And this is when I feel like things started to come together for me. And even before that, or maybe it was around that time when I started developing those archetypes and leaning into those patterns, I remember I had a reading with a shamanic practitioner, as you do. And she asked me what I do. And I said, I'm a career change coach. And she said, oh, okay, well, you're not being honest with your clients. I'm like, excuse me? What do you mean I'm not being honest with my clients? What are you on about? She said, well, you read energy and you have access to much more information than you let on, and you need to lean into these gifts and be honest about it. You don't just do career coaching. And again, as a fiery, rebellious type that I am, I just don't like being told who I am and who I'm not, and I'm sure many of you can relate. So it took me some time to embrace this, that only now looking back, I understand what she meant. But that back then, I took it almost as an insult, as someone criticizing the choice of my path. So with time, I eventually learned that I'm primarily a mystic, and that is someone, honestly, that is something I struggle to accept for some time, because a mystic, again, if you've done the archetypal assessment, so you would know a mystic is a seer, and a lot of them often have different flavor of psychic abilities. So we call them the clears, and the 4 main ones, there are many more, but the 4 main ones are clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. I'm seeing visions. Clairaudience is clear hearing. I'm hearing voices. I know I'm not crazy. I'm just getting downloads. Clairsentience, which is clear feeling and sensing of what's happening. So like senses communicate to you, or claircognizance, which is clear knowing. So I'm getting intuitive downloads. So myself being primarily claircognizant, I would have these intuitive drop-ins and inner visions, and I will either have them as a thought that drops in, So for the longest time, I had to learn to discern what is my thought, my personal, my ego, Vilma thinking, and what is actually a download, which is literally has nothing to do with my opinions and my ego and my point of view. Okay. Or sometimes I'll be shown a visual and I see it in my mind's eye, not in my world, not outside of me, in the third eye. And then I would describe it to people. Or sometimes I see text. So I would see words or sentences written white on black. So it's almost like the text written in a night sky. Again, I don't see it in 3D. I get shown it inside my mind's eye. And then if that feels right, I will communicate that to whoever is in front of me. So I always had this, but I feel like when I moved into coaching, this gift got stronger naturally because just like with any other gifts, the more we use them, the more expressed they get and the more control of them we have. A lot of the times, and I found that as well with many healers, if they have some sort of innate abilities, they just don't know how to work with them because they feel random when they show up or they feel hard to harness sometimes. But it really is just getting the reps in, just repetition and starting to use it more and more until it becomes a powerful ally in your work and in your life. So I also noticed that one of the gifts that I had as well, and then again, I really hate making this about myself, but I feel like sometimes the feedback that I get when I share more about my story, it helps people understand themselves better. So that's the only reason why I'm doing that. One of my very weird, unique flavors is I'm like this antenna for alignment. So I will get a certain bodily, somatic, visceral reaction to alignment. So for example, you're my client and you're telling me like a business idea or a career offer, and then I would literally get like this physical, visceral response. And what I've noticed, a lot of people do that, but they ignore that. So for me, it's like full body chills and full body goosebumps. Or when something is misaligned, it's in my body. It's like my body goes really still. And it's almost like contraction and dead silence when something is misaligned. Then I would not say that something is misaligned. I would ask questions why someone feels so strongly about, say, an idea. If we were communicating about a business idea or a business offer, I would want to understand where it's coming from. And often, a lot of the times, 9 out of 10 times, what we would find that the idea that they had was not driven by their soul, was not actually aligned with them, was not coming bottom up, like I said, from inside of me. It was top down, meaning I heard someone did that and that. I heard this is a great business model. And so that means that it's almost like the idea is actually misaligned. And this is not to say that we should only always follow alignment, okay? Or we should only do what we feel like is a good decision. Sometimes we'll just have to do what we have to do. However, when it comes to these big, pivotal life decisions, for example, like choosing a new career, that's when I pay extra attention to that. However, again, what's important to say that each person has its own language when it comes to the messages, the signals, the bodily reactions that you'll receive. And it's up to us to learn to decipher it because oftentimes it's going to be very specific for us. So again, listening to me share this, and I share it very specifically, and then I'm inviting you to ask yourself, if you are also an intuitive empath, if you also get downloads, what does that feel like for you? Or when does it come? Or how does it show up? Is there a pattern? Because it is a language, okay? It is a language, and we can actually become fluent in it. So those intuitive gifts, which later, what I learned and now call, or more like a channel, is the mystic archetype. And then I learned that my secondary is an architect. And an architect is someone who's drawn to building systems and frameworks and systemizing and organizing themes, patterns, processes, which is quite funny because in one of my previous career paths, I was a management consultant, and process improvement is what I specialized in and actually quite enjoy. So that goes to show again that nothing that we learn or experience leading up to then aligned business is redundant. It's all a preparation. So this Lightworker archetypal system, for example, is exactly to a T what a mystic architect would create. So they would sort of intuit, observe, channel, if you will, a system, And then the architect would build a framework around it. And that's the reason why I'm having so much fun with this system. And having fun is important, at least to me personally. That's one of my core values, fun. It's important for me to have that in my business. And then when I started sharing that with the world, with the healers, the responses started coming in. And at this point, I had hundreds of healers take the assessment, and the results really surprised me too. So many of them said that they either felt extremely validated, like, oh, I am on the right track, and that feels good that this random assessment told me that this is exactly what I do. And the assessment perhaps added a deeper layer of insight and understanding of their path. Some of them had messages, because I'm doing these short readings now on Instagram. Some of them even literally cried. They recorded me a message crying, saying that they sensed that this was sort of where they needed to go, but they felt so lost in trying to understand how to use their gifts. And that, to me, honestly, is surprising. Because as you know, when you create something and you share it with the world, you just have no idea how it was going to be received. Is it working? Is it helpful? So it always is a little bit of a gamble. And I will say, for those of you who are being called to healing work or starting your healing work, what I found, they usually face two very simple and practical questions. It's much more grounded, much more basic than a lot of people think. And it's not that complicated. Question number one is usually they want to understand what their core gifts or the medicine is about. In other words, how am I supposed to impact? How am I supposed to help? How am I supposed to serve? Should I be a massage therapist? Should I offer mindset coaching? Should I do energy healing, right? Like, where do I start? What is the essence of my gift? That's the first question always. The second question is, okay, now that I know, how do I translate that into aligned business, into aligned practice, into aligned offers? In other words, how do I make money from it? These are usually, when we distill down, and notice if you're someone who's just starting out and you feel like, oh my goodness, there are 1,000,001 questions that I need answers. I'm going to tell you these two are always the main ones that you can distill all of your problems and questions to. Is how am I supposed to impact? How am I supposed to heal and guide? And then how do I monetize it in a way that does not make me sick in my mouth, that doesn't feel misaligned, where I am not ghosting my business because the business side of it feels so off to me? How do I do that? How do I make good money, but also that business model feels aligned? So that's why I'm so excited, because I feel like the assessment answers the first question and can literally save someone years of misery and confusion, which is, how am I supposed to help people? That's the first biggest question that I've seen people spin in over and over and over and over again and get distracted and start questioning everything. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this work is because, again, I'm in the front lines and I see firsthand what it's like to be confused about the how. And that's why I made this assessment free, and I'm even offering mini readings to people on Instagram for free to help them find that clarity and that validation, okay? Because when they don't know, they will be taking multiple courses, multiple certifications. They'll be hiring a lot of support. I had someone recently say they spent over 100K in the last 3 years trying to figure out what they should do in the healing world. Like, what should be their business, what should be their modality, what should be their offer. That breaks my heart. You could buy a house probably without money. Well, I don't know, depending, I guess, where you come from. Definitely a really fancy car. And at the same time, I will say I'm not shaming people who do that. I used to be one of them. I deeply understand this need to know more and have more clarity to feel certain about what's next. Okay? Or some people, even if they don't spend that much money in getting support and clarity and certifications, they will end up building misaligned healing businesses. And like most of the healers we see out there, that you see that are quote unquote the most successful or maybe the loudest are either people who have coaching businesses or people who are more into energy work, say psychics, healers, tarot readers, astrologers. So we consciously or unconsciously think that we need to become that. Hey, before we continue, I want to chat with you real quick. If you're anything like most of the people in this space, you're probably someone who's drawn to so many different aspects of healing. Maybe energy work calls to you. Maybe you're interested in psychology and mindset. Maybe you're fascinated by herbalism or somatic practices. Maybe you're into intuitive development, or maybe you just love creating systems and frameworks to help others transform. Or perhaps you're someone who wondered, why can't I just pick one thing? Why am I interested in absolutely everything? So here's what I want you to hear. These interests that you have are not random. They are not a sign that you are scattered or that you are unfocused. They are breadcrumbs that are leading you to your specific medicine. And this unique combination of what lights you up, that's your signature. That's your unrepeatable, unique blend of gifts. And I've created something to help you make sense of it all. It's called the Lightworker Archetype Assessment, which is a completely free tool that will help you uncover your primary healing gifts and how you're meant to weave all of these passions together into your unique expression. It takes about 15 minutes to complete, and I've had already hundreds of lightworkers telling me that it was like finally finding the missing puzzle piece. Some laughed because it suddenly made perfect sense, and others cried because they finally felt seen for who they truly are. You'll find a link to the assessment in the show notes. That's all. It's almost like we have two choices. Okay, so I need to become some sort of coach because I don't want to go back to school. I don't want to be a therapist. So I need to go for coaching. Or I need to talk to dead people to be able to earn money. That's like essentially it's so binary for us. That's why I'm so upset when I see that. I'm like, hold on. There are so many beautiful healers in between, right? There are artists, performers, earth guardians, architects, and so many other archetypes who can and should carve out super unique niches for themselves. But the only reason why they don't do that is because they don't understand their gifts. They don't understand the essence of their medicine. So what they do, they fit themselves into misaligned models, thinking that's the only way to do healing work. Well, newsflash, it's not. Okay? That's why this nuance that the healer archetype system provides is important. Okay. And I'll be frank, I really, like I said, I'm taken aback by the feedback and messages and love that I've been getting from my fellow light workers. It's like the system honestly doesn't even feel mine because it came through me and now it's taken a life of its own. So sometimes I struggle to even own it because, let's be honest, it's a combination of deep ancestral knowledge that we all contain in our blood, in our DNA. That's why a lot of this, especially for me when I was creating it and for those who are taking it, like I said, it feels like a deep remembrance. It feels like a deep, oh, that's right. Okay. And this isn't just poetic language. There's actual science behind this. One of the people that I studied when I was creating this system was obviously Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who first developed the archetypal theory back in, I think it was early 1900s. And he was the one who started proposing that archetypes aren't learned. They are inherited. And he would refer to that as collective unconscious. So those of you who studied his work, you're familiar with this. And that collective unconscious is almost like a layer of our psyche that contains universal memories, universal patterns, and images that are shared across all humanity in spite of where we come from. And he wrote that sort of these archetypes are inherited potentials, if you will. Not specific memories, but rather the capacity to recognize and enact these human patterns of thought and action. And that's, I feel like archetypes, the healer archetypes is exactly that inherited potential that we have, inherited through our lineage, inherited from past lives, right? Think of it this way, just as we inherit some sort of physical structure of our arms and legs and the face, Jung would argue that we inherit psychological structures or the archetypal patterns that are imprinted on us as a result of simply being alive, as a result of evolution. Okay, so it's almost like a lot of the archetypal nature, that's why I call it as remembering who you are. It's not something that we are taught, it's something that we are predispositioned, something we're born with. And also, if you want to like go one level and kind of look at more recent history, we also have evolutionary psychology, which I find fascinating. And it has also shown that certain behaviors occurring universally across all cultures. For example, like an ability to sense someone's emotions or discern kin from non-kin, or maybe work and collaborate and cooperate with others, are great candidates for evolutionary adaptations, right? So we almost inherit these pre-wired motivational systems in our psyche, okay? And then obviously we have lots of research now in neuroscience and what scientists also call now the fixed archetypal action patterns. And these are almost like universal neural patterns that evolve to solve recurring survival challenges. Okay, so for example, like birds will instinctively know how to build nests, or humans have these inherited psychological patterns for maybe caregiving and protecting and teaching and transformation. Like we have it. No one taught us that. We just reawaken that within us. And that's where I feel like it gets even more fascinating if you want to nerd out on this, because in the field of epigenetics, it also reveals that our ancestors' experiences, which includes trauma, but also the wisdom and the insight and the resilience, it can actually leave markers on our DNA that will get passed down through generation and generation. Okay, so while the DNA sequence itself doesn't change, but the way our genes are expressed can be influenced by what our ancestors experienced. Okay, isn't that fascinating? So that's why I say, this system is created by me, the archetypal system, but it's not a unique system. It's based on that collective conscious. So when people take the Lightworker archetype assessment and say, this feels right. I got so many messages like, this feels right. This feels right. It does feel like I'm remembering something. They're correct. They are not learning something new. They're recognizing something that has been encoded in the human psyche, maybe for millennia, especially for healers. So, the mother archetype, the mystic, the teacher, the revolutionary, like I said, these aren't modern inventions. They are ancient patterns that had shown up in myths, in rituals, in healing traditions across every culture that has ever existed. Okay. So, okay, one more thing. I'm getting excited. One more thing. And this is kind of what gives me chills. Like Jung himself said that archetypes essentially, and I'm going to butcher his quote, but something around it dwells in a world beyond the chronology of a human lifespan. And it's developing on this evolutionary timescale. Okay. So what we're experiencing within these archetypes is not just personal, it's transpersonal. They belong to all of us. Okay. So again, when I say this system doesn't feel mine, and when I say that I'm trying to share this with you so you would see how powerful of a tool it can be, I mean that literally. I didn't invent these archetypes. I simply mapped patterns that have always existed in that collective human psyche, patterns that are quite literally carried in our DNA, passed down through countless generations of healers, of seers, of builders, of warriors, of caregivers who came before us. Ooh, I'm getting goosebumps. Okay. And also, by the way, don't think it's, accidental that this archetypal system was kind of came through right now, because many, many healers are waking up and they are recommitting to their calling or moving towards more alignment, because what's to come, especially in the coming couple of years, is pivotal for the humanity in general, for the humanity's evolutionary direction. Okay. And I'm not here to be like, doom and gloom and be like, oh my goodness, it is going down. No, I'm just saying it's going to be challenging times. That's why we need more light workers, people who carry the light within them. And if you're resonating with this, if you do identify with what I'm sharing, or again, listening to me feel as some sort of remembering, here's what I want you to remember, that it doesn't matter where you're at your journey. You are not behind. You can never be behind. You can never be behind. Your timeline is perfect. You haven't wasted any time. And even if you're one of those people that I, called out who took so many certifications, like with every certification, every course, every quote unquote, what you consider as wrong turn, or every job that you thought was off track, it's all been preparing you for this moment, for your real work, for your aligned expression. And the world really doesn't need misaligned healers. We don't need more light workers who are trying to squeeze themselves into boxes that they were never designed to fit. We don't need another carbon copy coach or psychic doing what everyone else is doing. We don't need that. The world needs you in your full, specific, unrepeatable medicine. And whether you're an artist, whether you're an earth guardian or a revolutionary or performer or architect or mystic, I could list all of them. Whatever that combination is for you, that is what the world is waiting for right now. And you don't have to spend another decade or another 10K trying to figure it out, okay? So this is my deep, sincere calling. If you haven't taken the assessment, the Lightworker Archetype Assessment, please do it now. You'll find the link in the show notes. I am for a short period of time. I don't know when I'll stop. I said I'll stop when I'll stop having fun, but for a short period of time, if you take the assessment, you screenshot the results for me, I will come back to you with a little short mini reading. I do voice notes, and I will expand more on your primary and secondary archetype. And I will also give some additional intuitive messages that are coming through for you specifically. Okay. So please do that. I'm just curious. I'm actually leading a little bit of a statistics to see what are the most popular archetypes. I will talk a little more about that as well. And in the coming series, what I will do, I'm going to have a new Lightworker series. So this is where I am chatting to different archetypes. Okay. And we'll be talking about how their archetypes are expressed in a business setting. So this is going to be more of sort of a business series. So for example, if I talk to someone who is an architect, we will talk about how they set up the business, why they made certain decisions, how they found their gift. So I feel like that more specific, tangible, tactical, if you will, episodes are going to be helpful for many of you, because I feel like when we hear stories, that's when we learn. When we hear examples, that's when we have those aha moments. And I'll also be doing some solo episodes where I'll be introducing some of these archetypes in more detail, because there's so much that I could tell you about each archetype. And I am very excited to record these episodes for you. Sending you a big hug, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you enjoy this content, please make sure you subscribe to this podcast and leave a quick review to help us share the message of aligned work with the world. And if you'd like to learn more about how to find and transition into your very own purpose-led career or business that feels like getting paid for being yourself, make sure you check out the episode notes below. Have a wonderful week.